What does an 18-year veteran of the tech industry and a 20-year veteran of the military have in common? More than you might think. Welcome, everyone, to the Second Act podcast, leveling up your life's journey. Here we are again. Welcome back to the Second Act podcast with Michael and John. How are you doing? How you doing today, John?
I'm good. Middle of the week. So, a little off our vibe, getting some recordings in the early stages of our week, but we were just commenting off the air how fast time goes when you look at everything you're trying to do throughout the day. And man, it's crazy. And it makes me think of prioritization and the things that are truly important in life. And, I'm trying to make time to go see my son wrestle and spend time at another son's play at school. And it's like, where do you fit in all this other work stuff? But it feels good. Feels good. How about you?
Yeah, it's hard to juggle sometimes, and prioritization, especially when you're just getting started out with something like many of our guests and us are doing. There's seems to be always more things to do than time to do them. So trying to figure out what's the most important thing of the day and then what are those most important things for the week is a challenge. But I'll tell you, one of the things that's helped me, and I think I've talked about it before on the show, but a couple of years ago, went through transcendental meditation and learning that practice, TM, and I've been doing it more frequently now, and it's when you're doing it twice a day as they recommend, it really has amazing effects on your ability to focus and think and bring you into the present. And my brother-in-law recommended a book called The Creative Act by a music producer named Rick Rubin, very legendary guy, really. And it's not what I was expecting in the book, but it's really fascinating read. And I came to learn that he's also a practitioner of meditation, including TM, and just his thought process and how he approaches the creation of music and how he explains the creation of anything. I started to think of you and me as creators, artists in a way, and how we're telling our story and helping guests tell their stories. So just a fascinating read if you're looking for something. And
you're talking about meditation. I met a lady over the weekend who listens to the show, and comically enough, she said, "I love your guys' show." And I said, "Thanks. What is the favorite? What do you enjoy about it?" And she said, "You guys are so calm when you speak. It always puts me to sleep."
Oh, no.
And I said, well, I don't know if I want to put our audience to sleep, so I hope no one falls asleep today. But hey, at least we got a listener out there that's getting something out of it. So, why don't you, with that?
We're bringing peace to people. I like that.
That's right. With that, why don't you introduce our guest?
Absolutely. So, in this week's episode, we are joined by Martin Skea, a corporate executive turned entrepreneur who grew up in New Jersey with a big family, but as an adult has spent time living in New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, DC, but now calls Brussels, Belgium home. So he's joining us overseas. I know it's a little bit late, so thanks for hopping on, Martin. Your professional career has not been boring. Spending time at the New York Department of City Planning, as well as industry leaders such as KPMG, IBM, Schwab, and Wells Fargo. And in your final corporate stop at Wells, you served as one of their executives overseeing strategy, operations, and marketing before deciding to start your own company called ToGatherHomes. As founder and CEO of ToGatherHomes, Martin has reimagined housing development by offering developers and social housing agencies pre-designed, pre-engineered, prefabricated housing designs made with mass timber. That's pretty cool stuff. I'm looking forward to talking about
is.
that. Outside of work, Martin enjoys spending time with his partner of 20 years, married for 15, so congratulations on that, as well as your 2 pets. And you like to pursue interests around history, geography, maps, cities, architecture, and real estate. So all of these are very complementary, I think, at least in some respects, to the work you're doing now, which is likely rooted in your family history, where your dad was a civil engineer who had some unique ties to the development of the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers. So very cool. Welcome to the show, Martin.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. And thank you, John. Glad to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity. And congratulations on your new endeavor, too. It's great what you're doing.
Thank you.
Well, sorry it's so late. What time is it there, Martin?
It's only 7 o'clock. This is early.
All right. Perfect.
This is early.
Well, Martin, I want to start off. I mean, in the bio, talking about New York, San Francisco, Los Angeles, D.C., those are, huge hubs, huge mega centers here in the United States, places that all get, their own recognition and for various reasons, and important to our culture and our economy. And, so you're living in all those places, super culturally diverse. But let's go back to the start of Martin and your early childhood years and the formation of who you are today. And let's talk about those things that shaped you. If you would, just give us a little bit of a background.
Give us a glimpse.
Sure thing. Sure. You mentioned, Michael, the big family. I've got 5 brothers and sisters. We grew up in Jersey, just across the river from New York City. My dad, as you mentioned, was a civil engineer. One of his projects was the construction of the World Trade Center.
Wow.
He did the finance, budgeting, and estimation for buildings all across New York City. What was Giant Stadium, the racetrack in New Jersey. And I guess he saw something in me, or maybe knew something about my interest in him when I was little, 6 years old. It had to be. Actually preparing for this, I looked it up. The World Trade Center was done in 1973, and by then I was 8 years old, but it was halfway done when my dad took me down to the waterfront, and he showed me the World Trade Center. And
wow.
I was like, so this is how that's built, and it's different than anything else. My little sister was with me, and she had no idea what was going on, but for me, it was like magic, and my dad was interested in me, and I was interested in it. It was really beautiful. That was kind of the beginning of that part of the story. And then the other part about, I guess I always had this wanderlust. I have one sister like me too, or I'm like her. We both have this keen wanderlust. And I made it so that my initial spell, the word maps, you get a middle name, and as a Catholic growing up, you got a confirmation name. So my name is Maps, and in my bedroom, I had globes all over the place. Back then on TV, there was not a lot of travel shows, but there were animal shows. They'd have like animals in Africa. And so I'd look up in the encyclopedias that my mom bought for me where those animals were from, and then where they were on the globe. And it was all pretty cool. So I had this wanderlust from a childhood and this interest in this kind of how a city was made. My dad helped kind of bring along and pull forward for me.
Very cool.
Wow.
And at that time, when the World Trade Center was finished, was it the tallest structure in the world? It was, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It was after that, actually, I think the Sears Tower, it's now called the Willis Tower in Chicago. When that was built, my dad took pictures of it and sent it to me. He traveled over the years to St. Louis and came back with pictures of the Gateway Arch, and just I'd sit and be fascinated by all this stuff with him. It's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I love the story of you, your room, and I can almost visualize it, just, you being engrossed in maps and the geography of the world and imagining yourself in different places. And I've got a friend that I was in the Marine Corps with, and he had above his bed a poster of all the flags of every country. And to this day, he can still look at a flag and tell you what country it's from.
Yeah, cool.
That's cool. 250 plus countries, and he can still rattle them off. And that it's so amazing how when we're young and as you said, kind of filled with wonder, and how the things that we surround ourselves can be so influential in our later lives. I've got a picture of me here in my office I've got a helmet on and a parachute, and I'm looking up at a pilot sitting in the cockpit of a jet, and how that just played into my later life. And here you are as a kid, dreaming about all these places. And then look, in the bio, we read off, 5 incredible places that you've lived, and now you're in Brussels. So it's amazing to see that.
It's nice to live it too, for sure.
For sure.
I'm sure.
And seeing what your dad does and seeing these incredible structures larger than life as a kid, you're getting this amazing perspective in the city and urban planning and engineering world. You head into university and you decide, based on that passion that you inherited from your family circumstances, you focus on urban economics. Tell us about that decision. And then if there's any way to connect the dots from like decision points in your earlier childhood years that led up to that, and then share a bit about this field, because I don't know, including myself, I'm not entirely sure about what is involved in urban economics. So just share a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, sure thing. So I loved going to cities. I loved going into New York City. Was fascinated by the city, fascinated by why are tall buildings down the bottom of the city, kind of downtown, and then lower buildings, and then taller buildings at the Empire State Building. It's all about geology, actually. But just the idea that, cities, urban economics, cities and metro areas in the U.S. Are 91% of the GDP, 91% of the income and wages, and I think 82%, not 82% of the population. It's just, huge impact on the economy. It is the economy, right?
Yeah.
Those numbers, that is the economy. And so, and what they are places where culture are. John, you just said this. They're places where culture are manifested, where knowledge is gathered, where capital is created. And so, but how do you actually facilitate an environment so that all of that can happen, and people can live with each other, and people can kind of function well and get to where they need to go, all of that. And how do you ensure that the financials supporting that city are directed in the right places so that you're getting the best support to the people and the best support to the businesses to be able to thrive?
Wow.
I'm having trouble trying to envision the number of variables that go into that planning model, because it seems almost infinite.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing is when you get out of school, you study that. And what I did was I did an internship in Washington, D.C., actually. My sister had taken me when I was 15 to Washington, D.C., part of my wanderlust. And she said, "Where in the world would you like to go?" And I said, "Washington, D.C. to see the Jefferson Memorial."
Oh, wow.
Because of its architecture. And so she took me. And then there was an opportunity in school to do an internship, and I did it with a place called the Washington Center, which focused on international downtown issues, revitalizing downtowns. It doesn't sound reasonable to us right now because so many downtowns are thriving, but back in the 80s, there was a lot of flight out to suburbs, and downtowns weren't happening. So the idea of what's your budget need to be? What does your budget need to be? What kind of development needs to be made available? What do you need to restrict? And how do you also ensure that you've got population and all of the services to support that population to make for a thriving city? There's a lot of variables. Once you get back into the real world, you're sliced into a zoning group or a environmentals group or a neighborhood context group. So I was able to work in a couple of those in New York City. And it was at a time when the economy wasn't really good. And so sometimes we would sit around at lunch and refer to ourselves as the Department of City reacting as opposed to city planning, because it was, whoever wanted to do anything was getting the green light because there was nothing happening. So if you wanted to do something, you got to do it.
Martin, I'm fascinated. You're talking about cities and people not thinking or having a hard time to imagine them as not being these thriving economic centers. But I remember when I first moved out to San Diego, and I lived in San Diego for a number of years in my early military career, and people would always say, "Oh man, it's so good to see San Diego's downtown growing again and to see it thriving." And they talked about those early 80s, mid 80s, late 80s, how it just was a place that nobody would go to. And then, at the end of my career, I was in DC, and people would talk about East DC as being incredibly rough and the waterfront there being incredibly tough. But now you're starting to see just this development and people moving back in and money coming back in. And, it carries some, there's some negative connotation too about people being priced out of where they live and,
absolutely,
gentrification and things like that. But I would say for the most part, I've been able to experience the tail end of those revitalizations. And it's just amazing to see life thriving there. And so, it's really cool to know that you're passionate about that as well.
It's that gentrification, John, that you're talking about. That is one reason why I'm doing what I'm doing with ToGatherHomes.
Nice.
So
Okay.
I'm interested to share that with you as well, Michael. I know you got some questions.
I was just going to say, I mean, we all seem to have a shared experience of seeing city transformation at one stage or another. I grew up in Miami, Florida in the 80s and 90s. So I saw that go from sort of a less popular place to becoming an Art Deco district full of culture and vibrance and nightlife, and now it's one of the world's top destinations for international as well as domestic travelers. So it's just seeing the journey of these cities and what they become and where they're going is just quite a fascinating thing to witness.
Well, and in Miami, they built that ridiculous thing that goes, you take around the top. They're kind of subway, but upway, I guess
the Metro Rail, I think it's called.
Yeah, but it wasn't until the 2000s that they started doing all the other things, bringing in museums, bringing in cultural institutions, bringing in centers for the arts, right? And bringing in some great New York restaurants as well. I have to say, one of my favorites is right there on the waterfront. So, and it's when you tie all of those things together, and that's what makes the economics, right? Because it brings people from wherever they were to go to that museum, to go to that cultural center, and then to eat at that restaurant before or after. So all of those things tied together present a much more rich and vibrant city.
Awesome.
So, Martin, you graduate from school, and your first stop is New York, correct?
Yeah.
And you go in and you start doing environmental city planning for New York.
Yep.
And you're there for a couple of years, and then corporate America, before you become an entrepreneur. But there's a lot, I think, in that statement. Obviously a lot of places, but tell us, about a little bit about your journey from New York, and on, and kind of encapsulate what happens in those 30 years.
Yeah, sure thing. 30 years.
Hey,
right?
you got to do it in just a few minutes here.
Yeah, do it in a couple minutes.
2 minutes. So, I had a call from a family friend, actually my brother's friend, Tom Canelon. And Tom said, hey, I work at Charles Schwab, and there's great people here, and it's a meritocracy. It's growing by leaps and bounds, and I think you'd love it here. And you're working in city planning, but you're not having fun there, right? I was like, well, I'm not being paid all that well, and so what does this Charles Schwab thing do? I had no idea.
Yeah.
And this is a theme of my career, actually, John and Michael. I had no idea.
I love it.
So he said, well, it's trades and mutual funds. And I was like, I don't have any idea what that is. He said, come in for an interview anyway and just talk to us. So I did. I got the job. And I had to get my Series 7 license. It's, one of the largest brokerage firms in the country now. It was early stage. There wasn't even internet at the time. It was, you'd get a CD-ROM so you could do some trading on your computer, dial up, AOL or whatever. And but it was an entrepreneurial meritocracy was quite competitive, but really decent people. There's this woman, Vicky Isom. She was amazing. She was my mentor in Millburn, New Jersey. And so I worked there for a bit, and then I got a job in New York City. And in New York City, I did front office stuff. I did back office stuff. I was a manager pretty quickly. And then because I had done back office, front office, and everything in between, they were doing this re-engineering project about kind of how to re-engineer processes, re-engineer the corporation. And this was in my wheelhouse because it was about how to fix stuff, how to make things different and better. And so I was asked to participate with the consultants. They were from Coopers and Lybrand at the time. And so I worked with them half a day, and then I managed my team the other half of the day.
And this is all at Charles Schwab, correct?
Charles Schwab in New York City.
Okay.
And but it was as a result of that I was presented to all these executives at Schwab. I was presenting about the problems with how the business functions, and I guess doing it in a way that was acceptable to their ears. But it provided me a lot of exposure, and it's that work that helped introduce me to management consulting, which is where I went next. And I worked with Charles Schwab. I worked with KPMG, and in doing so, I had projects in Europe, actually a pan-European project. I had no idea what I was doing. I laughed with a guy. My client there was Morgan Stanley, and he was like, "You always acted as if you knew what you're doing." I was like, "I had no idea what I was doing. I had to figure it out like every night." But we got it done, and sooner or later we left London, and I was called by a former client and asked if I wanted to work with them in San Francisco. So that was Roberts and Stevens. I had a great time there. It's not on the menu, but from there I went back to consulting. It was 9/11. A whole bunch of stuff happened, and then I needed to leave New York for life change. Long story, longer than we have. And I moved to California in this IBM company. It wasn't IBM at the time, but it was bought by IBM, called FileNet. And there were great people who helped teach me what I needed to do, because guess what? I didn't know that very well at all. I didn't know what I was doing, but I figured it out. I did that for just 1 year. And while I was there, I got a call from a former consulting managing director who, Christy Deacon was her name. And she said, "Why don't you come to Wells Fargo?" And I said, "What do you got?" And she said, "I've got this, that, the other thing." And I said, "Where do you need the most help?" And she said, "Here." I said, "Okay, let's talk about that." So that was 2005, and I got to spend 15 years at Wells Fargo. Wow. A little bit more than that. It was a great run with great people and a real commitment to do the right things for the longest time. So I had a good time there, and I got to work both in the banking side and the brokerage side, but always with this mindset of how do we make it better? How do we, what kind of strategies can we use to help the client better? What kind of strategies can we use to help our team members have a better experience? What kind of technology is necessary? And so I was always dabbling in technology, and at one point we were moving into a digital kind of wealth management space. It still hasn't taken off the way everybody had hoped. But with that, I had a lot of exposure to startups and a lot of exposure then to kind of talking with equity investors and then talking with VCs. And it wasn't my primary gig. There were some other much smarter people who were doing it, but I had the opportunity to be close to that. And it was through that and some other personal things along the way. I produced a play in Washington. I produced a play in New York City. And I had a gallery in San Francisco that I ran when I wasn't doing a second job.
I'm sorry I missed the playwright stuff in your bio if you included it, but that's just another interesting dimension.
I don't know if I did, but I had a friend who was a playwright. I had a friend and I produced plays for him in 2 different places.
Very cool.
It was pretty fun. I had no idea what I was doing, but we figured it out. It's a story of my life, and it's kind of similar now, but now I'm actually really knowledgeable about what I'm doing. So I feel good about that.
There's two things, Martin, that are, one is very consistent with our guests, in that whether it's they've been doing something or on their sort of professional journey for 3 years or 30 years, they can recall specific names of people that have touched their lives in one way or another. And then some even go as far back as when they were a child. But it's those specific names, and it's amazing. You're crossing paths with tens of thousands or more people in your lifetime, and interacting with a subset of that. But there's these specific people that really sort of change the trajectory of your thinking and your actions. And I find that really interesting. And then the second thing that you brought up is how you go in sort of eyes wide open, but no experience, to take on new challenges in pursuing new things. And it's funny that we're talking about this today, because going back to the creative act and Rick Rubin and his thought process with producing music, he goes into it with a very open mind when he's trying to figure out what is great to him and the artist. And they get to a place where they're happy with it, and then they release it. So there's just some complementary aspects of your journey and the things that you're doing and his thought process, just to tie those two things together. And I myself have found some of, maybe most of my best experiences are new experiences, oftentimes shared with someone else who is also doing that for the first time, or doing it sort of differently with me for the first time.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the people. It's the people that make the difference, right?
Absolutely.
And the people who provide a leg up or pull you forward, just like my dad did when he saw that I had this interest. He kind of pulled it forward in me, and other people helped pull me along all along the way.
Awesome.
Martin, I'm encouraged by that story you tell of you being at Schwab, and how somebody sees you and says, Martin, you always look like you know what you're doing, but behind the curtain, you're panicking, maybe, or you're dealing with imposter syndrome, or you have doubts about where you're at and where your energy is going. And one, that's reassuring to me, because that's how I feel a lot of times. But two, I think we've got a lot of listeners that are embarking on their second act or in their second act, and probably think to themselves, I don't belong here. I have no idea what I'm doing. But that's part of the process. That's part of figuring out your strengths, your weaknesses, where you can bring in other teammates to do, to help supplement where you are weak. But it's just encouraging to hear you talk about the places you've lived, the big name companies that you've worked for, and then go back to, I had no idea what I was doing, but I was just cranking along, and here I am, years later, very successful, and it was a great experience. So
yeah, and just to tack onto that, John,
absolutely.
You get to you're starting those new things, and you're sort of, once you get going and the excitement has worn off a little bit, you're like, at least I have these thoughts sometimes. I don't know if this is going to work out. I don't know if this is the right road. But if you've had one or more successes over your life, and people have seen that, you get in your mind, like, people are expecting you to succeed. And then you're even harder on yourself, because, like, I have to succeed. If I fail, I'm going to look terrible. I'm going to feel terrible. So and you can harness and channel that into your energy to try to do the best that you can to try to make it successful. But you still can't predict the outcome of something. But again, that's the end result. But if we go back, it's more actually about the journey of it.
Yeah, it's completely about the journey and the learnings along the way.
Absolutely.
This episode is brought to you by ShipStation. If you run an e-commerce business, you know how much work it takes to produce something great while dealing with complicated shipping issues. That's why over 130,000 companies have turned to ShipStation, an innovative tool that allows you to focus less on shipping and more on building your brand. With ShipStation, you can manage orders, label printing, reporting, and customer service on one easy-to-use dashboard. You'll reduce warehouse costs with reliable enterprise solutions and save thousands on shipping costs with discounts up to 89% off. Plus, you can effortlessly import orders from everywhere you sell online. So, turn your shipping challenges into opportunities for growth. Go to ShipStation.com and use code POD to sign up for your free 60-day trial. That's ShipStation.com, code POD.
Takes us to this part of your journey where you've had 30 years across these amazing companies, and you're ending your 16-year career at Wells Fargo, rising to the ranks to become one of their senior leaders. But around the end of that, you enroll in Harvard's School of Design, which doesn't sort of fit the narrative of financial services. But you make a decision at some point to start your own business. Talk us through that next step.
Yeah. So I knew I was going to be leaving Wells. It was my desire to create a plan around that. And so I registered for this program at Harvard's Graduate School of Design. It's the Advanced Management Development Program in Real Estate Development. And I did that because when I decided I was going to be leaving Wells Fargo, I worked with an executive coach who was really great. And she was from Harvard Business School, or connected to Harvard Business School. And she suggested to me, in going through all of these, those tests and analyses that happen through a coaching relationship, that she said, "What's this thing about real estate development? It keeps popping up." I'm like, well, every city I've moved to, I've tracked the real estate development plan there. I'm connected to an organization in San Francisco called SPUR, which is the intersection of developers and urban planners and regional leaders to try to create some of the best parts of that city. Actually, ideas came out of SPUR. So I've stayed close to this my whole career, even though I was doing this other stuff. And I said, and I have a real passion for it. And she said, well, if you really think that's something you're interested in, there's this program through Harvard's Graduate School of Design, and the woman who started it is she's based in LA, and she gave me her name. And so I did what I have been doing with this new job, this new business, and all my life, is just reach out. I just reached out, and her name is Linda Law. I reached out to Linda Law, and I said, "Can I spend some time with you? I'm going to talk about this program." And she said, "Sure." So we spent 45 minutes. She said, "You should definitely apply for this program, but maybe you might want to talk to my other partner who helped found the program at Harvard's Graduate School of Design. Talk to Rick Pizer." And so I did. And Rick was like, "Yeah, you should definitely do this program." And so there I was, 44 classmates. It's a program that's been in place now for like 22, 23 years. And they started it back then. There were 44 of us in my year. We started 2019. We were supposed to graduate in 2020. There's a COVID story there. And I was the only person. There were 50% of the people were from around the world. Okay. The other 50% were from the States, a big chunk from Texas, actually. Go Dallas. And good friends. I made friends for life in that program, but I was the only one without experience in the real estate development business. Everybody else had some kind of background. So it was a great learning and an amazing way to make a network. And in that program, I kind of fused a passion that I have for urban economics, for social justice, and for environment. Nice. So I did my thesis was on social supportive housing in Los Angeles to help get people out of the criminal justice system and into housing that they could be provided services for a temporary or longer term period.
Nice.
I hired an architect to design some concepts. I made a cold call to 2 different agencies in LA and started working with them on what their requirements were. I can't believe the amount of time this guy Ryan gave me so much of his time to help shape what was needed. And I submitted my thesis on that, which was well received in the program. And it was based on that and all of the studying that I had done about how much gentrification has happened and how much financialization of housing, financialization of real estate has occurred over the past couple of decades. And I just heard a stat tonight that something like 40% of 18 to 32-year-olds in Ireland live at home with their parents because they can't afford even a place to rent.
40%.
And I think there's 7 million to 10 million homes in the U.S. that need to be built so that young people can start their families and that kids can have a place to feel secure and develop well in. And all of that, talk about urban economics, all of that feeds into how do you create a civil society? How do you create a sound society? You think about all the craziness going on in the world and politics, and just people had homes we can get a lot more centered. It's like basic needs,
basic needs.
Food,
housing and shelter.
Right. And oh, by the way, a planet that we can all continue to live on. So it all came together pretty well.
That's fascinating.
This topic, I'm really interested in it, Martin, because this last year, with a few partners, we started a commercial real estate development company. And the thing that we were really focused on, while everybody else is doing, rehab of old apartments and throwing paint on them and, calling it value add, what we were really interested in is kind of the concept of what's now popular as the 15-minute city. And having everything you need within 15 minutes around your dwelling. And what we really liked about the concept was different price points for these residential units so that they're not all the same, and you don't get a bunch of, similar classed people all bundled together. It was, a couple very low rent units, and then some higher end, and then some affordable, for the idea that everybody would gather, run into each other, or have interaction with people that are outside of their typical class, typical ideal person that they would want to be running into. And we just thought that would be very dramatic for people growing up in these cities. And so, as you talk about equality, as you talk about, the opportunity for people to have housing, it's very inspiring. It's definitely very needed. But two, kind of a mix up from what we see on a day-to-day, where it's a box set of apartments and everybody's within the same class and same income levels and same, and we don't get the opportunity to diversify like you would walking down the street.
Well, and that's the thing, John, streets, right? I was growing up, I lived in a place where we lived in a neighborhood where there were individual homes, but the next home was 4 feet away from us. We had an alley between us, right? But I also lived not too far from a housing project that the government put up and never cared for, right? And so saw that disparity and the injustice associated with that. But the idea of this density, right? A 15-minute city, to have a 15-minute city, you have to have some density. It doesn't mean 20-story buildings, but it does mean row houses. It does mean multi-units in a row house, and it can mean some apartments. And that's exactly the design that we put into ToGatherHomes to make it so that we can recreate the village feel. And the cool thing about where I am here in Belgium is that one of the state governments, there's 3 states in a small country of Belgium. One of the states has a structure where they're putting money behind mixed income developments. So they have $1 billion billion euros, over 4 years to go into social, affordable, mixed income housing. And I think this is the right way to go. And we actually just submitted a bid to a first potential client yesterday.
Wow.
We're hoping to be able to do our first development sometime this year.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
I think this is where public and private enterprise come together to make things work in a way that benefits most, if not all, of society. Because if you leave it just to private enterprise in this specific sort of scenario, and you look at the incentives, the incentive is always around revenue and profits. And land is scarce, so you have to get the materials, which increase in cost each year, to build on the scarce land that you're paying a lot for. So you're always targeting higher and higher income levels to be able to justify your investments for your shareholders and your owners and all of those folks. And I think, Martin, some of the things that you're doing are just awesome. And, you brought up a specific use case with justice impacted folks trying to re-enter the world. And the tech company I was at last, they're doing a great job of helping inform other companies and society about this sort of untapped workforce. And part of their ways of educating folks is going through this re-entry simulation of what it's like if you were inside prison, and when you get out, sort of the things you have to rely on that most people take for granted. And it's an eye-opener. I mean, it's probably nothing like real life, but they try to get you close to getting a window of what that scenario is like. And so, some of the things you're doing are sure to have an impact. And I love the concept of the 15-minute city, and I think it's more popular in Europe to have shared resources with a community. It could be a shared communal garden. It could be a shared, all these sorts of pieces that go into basic living. And there's just more pockets of those. And I don't know why it hasn't been more widely adopted in the United States, but I hope that it does, because it's a very cool concept.
Yeah, part of it, you just need some density for that, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you that our approach, we have ToGatherHomes, affordability, sustainability, community, and that community is exactly the part you're talking about. It's ensuring that there's spaces for people to gather.
Yeah.
Get it? Yeah.
Nice.
For the community to gather. But it's critical. There's a place, when I did this program, social housing program, when I moved here, up in Rotterdam. There's a European university program called Erasmus, and I did a program there when I moved here. The community just in the city of Rotterdam, they have senior housing on one side, and then a children's school on the other side. And the senior housing has a playground for the seniors, but it's in front of the children's kindergarten. So the kids can come out and play with the seniors while they're kind of doing their stuff. And the kids' playground is down in front of the seniors' cafeteria. So they can walk down, and then they can do a little playing in front of the seniors and play with the seniors. That's a nice way to bring generations together, bring different folks together. Yeah.
Very cool. Martin, I want to go back because you alluded to it a little bit. When you're at Harvard, school design, you talk about you're there, COVID happens. I'm sure as it threw a wrench in everybody's plans, it kind of threw a wrench in yours, in the middle of a global pandemic, but you're determined not to get stopped, not to let that thwart your plans. And that's where you launched ToGatherHomes to solve some of these problems you're already talking about. But tell us about how you end Harvard, start ToGatherHomes, and kind of that thought process.
Sure thing. We were actually in Cambridge, and we left there on March 14th, and the world locked down March 16th. Right.
Wow.
2020. My husband and I moved here in October 2020, shortly after my mom died. It was pretty traumatic, but we got here October 3rd, and there was a second lockdown here. He has a job where he's kind of helping ensure the internet is running for the world as managing director of Europe for his organization. Okay. So he's busy. And I had a lot of time on my hand because I
big deal running the internet for the world.
A little bit. He runs the internet for the world, just a bit. And I used to have 800 people reporting to me at one point at Wells Fargo, and now there's no emails coming in. Right, I'm just taking classes and learning about a new business and putting together a business plan, and figuring out how to start a business in a new country. By the way, Belgium has three national languages: French, Dutch or Flemish, and German. I speak none of them fluently, so why not? Right?
Why not?
Why? Some people think I'm tenacious. Other people think I'm just thick-headed. I think it might be more the latter than the former. But bottom line is, I wanted to do this. I thought we were going to move to LA instead of Belgium, but here we are. And you got a plan, you got a mission, you got a passion and a purpose. You got to follow through. So I learned what was needed. I learned the government projects, the programs. I reached out to the head of the innovation fund and said, I want to tell you about what we're doing so you can give us some grants, and we're going to apply for some grants. And I've had amazing support. The networking has been amazing. Everybody, it's like one angel after another just lifts you up and like places you in front of the next one. And I should introduce you to this one. I just had a call yesterday. I've had 3 introductions from this one call yesterday. Just fascinating. And then I have this team that is unbelievable. I got to tell you a quick story. There's this one guy on the team. His name is Dan. So I met Dan through a friend we met here. And he was studying architecture, but he was kind of sick of architecture. He studied in London. He wasn't keen on it. And he was going to work in the art gallery world. And his mom told me about it. And I said, do you mind if I talk to him? Because I'm going to start this business. Maybe I can have him join me. And so we scheduled a dinner. We had dinner. I sat next to Dan. And I said, so tell me about what's going on with the galleries. And afterwards, I said, yeah, you don't want to do that. I'm going to do this thing. It's going to help people. It's going to help the environment. It's going to change the industry that hasn't changed in forever. We're going to make an impact. It's going to be great. And he's been with me from day one, and he has the ability to do everything. He's younger than you could possibly imagine, with a maturity and a sense of himself that is unfathomable to me. I'm still not as mature as him, actually. I'm still working to be as mature as him. Anyway.
That's cool.
So we've got a team of 4 people, and me and partners galore. Had to hire architects and engineers, and met people in Switzerland who have introduced me to half the world around timber and what timber can do for construction. It's just the generosity of people it's just unbelievable.
My business partner with our development firm is really big on CLT, which I know you know what that is, but that's cross-laminated timber. It's revolutionizing, in his mind, building and code and things like that. But so when you talk about ingenuity, and that's how my business partner is. I laugh when you talk about the maturity of people you're working with. I think young and mature has never been said about me, but I definitely surround myself with people like that. So it's a testament to who you plug into those roles. So well done.
Thank you. Yeah, fortunate and blessed. That
another strange coincidence is within the last couple months, I was talking to someone here locally, Martin, who is familiar with some of the prefabricated, pre-designed homes to address affordability, and we started to go deep on the materials, and we were talking about bamboo and bamboo byproducts, and how that the exploration of some of that and what it can bring to this particular space has a lot of potential. So I don't know if that's something that you considered. It was fascinating for me. I feel like I've said fascinating so many times in this conversation today.
Yeah.
But I had a window into that, and now we're talking about it again. So hopefully, these 2 data points are a sign of a larger trend, both here in the States, but globally.
Yeah. Actually, bamboo, there's a great guy I was introduced to named Tano. He's down in Guatemala, and they build individual homes, but they're translating it into a whole. They're creating some open source designs. And I think he's kind of, educated in the States, but back there, he's also helping with the Guatemalan bamboo forest with offsets.
Okay.
For those who need that. And I just mentioned him to a woman I talked to who does housing finance for Africa, based in Netherlands. So, I mean, talk about the world that at your fingers. If you have some wanderlust, and you get to have conversations talking about housing there with bamboo over there with people here and there.
No kidding.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and to your point, what I learned is there's some positive ecological impacts from using bamboo, because it creates carbon credits, which they can sell or use to offset other things, which the whole ecosystem starts to work in a very positive way. So very cool stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay, so ToGatherHomes how is it progressing? I mean, I know you've got 4 people now. You've got some cool things lined up. You're in contract talks to get the ball rolling. What's in store for the rest of 24 that you'd like to share with our audience?
Super excited. So there's a startup incubator associated with the New European Bauhaus, which is about creating the kind of cities, John, that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And we submitted for that. We found out that we got through the first round of review. We find out March 22nd. So fingers crossed, and a couple of prayers will help us with that. And because, what do we want to do? We want to help society. We want to help put kids in homes, and we want to help the environment. So why not everybody support that? We have, and let me tell you, we started on January 9th was the day we put the full team together, architects, everybody else, last year. So we're now commercialized, putting out our first offers with our designs of row houses and row house apartments, and made with timber that can be manufactured while you're preparing your site, reduce the time to delivery by 30 to 40%.
Wow.
And reduce the amount of labor needed. Because we have so many types of houses, we can maximize the use of your land. Michael, you talked about the price of land. So we're trying to tackle it from every front. And then we're also putting in an application to build out a technology platform to support all of this in the construction process that will help digitize an industry that is stuck in the 1970s, if not earlier. And so you think about how we buy cars, everything that's in an iPhone. Think about everything that's in an iPhone. You just carry that around. And still you drive down the highway and you see somebody tacking a nail into a piece of wood to put up a house. Like, that's the way it was done 175 years ago, but we don't need to do it that way any longer. There's a much more rapid deployment. The need is great. You address civil society, you address individual families, and you address economic issues. So we're excited about what's coming. New European Bauhaus, waiting to hear about that incubator. Another potential client and partner that I was just meeting with today, with potential to do a proof of concept. So there's a lot of things working on the commercial front, and then also looking for more development, and then building a team beyond the 4 that we have. So we think we're just primed and in the right space. Oh, let me tell you one last thing.
Yeah.
We got one of the grants from that minister that I reached out to. And with that, we were able to take our designs that are Belgium-focused and adapt them for the Dutch market and German market. So we're ready to start having conversations in other countries sooner than later. We're really excited about that. I can't believe that I'm saying it. I'm like, what? Yeah, really? Yeah, this is
I know when you say it out loud, and I'm like, man, maybe Martin's up for a Nobel Peace Prize in the future. I don't know. I mean, this is pretty wild stuff.
I just want to get some kids in the homes.
I'm feeling luckier as you keep talking, Martin, that we've got you on this show. I feel like we lucked out, and it's going to be a hard continuation after this with our guests. But
no, thank you for that.
Well done.
You've got some great folks already, so I'm sure you've got a nice lineup.
We are excited to track your progress, Martin.
Thank you.
Yeah. As we start to wrap things up, your family exposure to civil engineering, your robust experience working in and out and across a number of industries has no doubt shaped your thinking, your work, your decisions. For our audience who are contemplating or just getting going on their second act, whatever that may be, personally or professionally, what final thoughts or advice would you like to leave them with? And that audience includes John and me, because we always learn from our guests as well. That you want to share before we bring this thing to a close?
Thanks for the opportunity again. And before I share that, for anybody listening, I think it's about passion. It's about purpose. For me, it's about clarity for both of those things. Wow. And being able to tell that story with that passion, help people understand that purpose, and suddenly kind of the ball starts rolling. So it's got to come from your heart. I think, I did a lot of stuff for a lot of years in a lot of companies that didn't necessarily feed my heart. It fed my wallet, but it didn't feed my heart. Working with great teams fed my heart, but this feeds my heart every day and fills a purpose that is really exciting.
Wow. That's cool.
It's good. Well, Martin, your story from childhood to where you are now, the places you've lived, the things you've experienced, the companies you've worked for, the things, you've endured, but also where you've succeeded. Though definitely a cool story, and better off for being able to sit here and listen to you. And we want to applaud you here at the Second Act. We want to applaud your efforts for, making an impact and a dent in a couple of the important areas that affect all of humanity.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
I'm sure after hearing your story that there's going to be a couple listeners that would love to follow your story more, potentially get in touch with you. So if somebody wants to do that, how's the best way for them to contact you?
Best way, you could shoot me an email, mskea, S-K-E-A, at ToGatherHomes.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, since I ruthlessly, I never stop reaching out to people on LinkedIn. So I'm there as well, Martin Skea.
Okay.
Perfect.
Wow.
This has been, I'm not going to use the word fascinating again.
Phenomenal.
Phenomenal. Thanks, John. This has been a phenomenal discussion, and I happen to really enjoy this particular topic, where you are in your life and the things that you're doing now, Martin, especially with regard to real estate. I know John has strong interest in real estate as well.
Dabbler.
But yeah, we wish you all the best, and we'll be sure to include all the links and information for people to reach out to you. So thanks again for coming on the show, spending your evening talking to Michael and John on this podcast. Our audience is really going to love this episode.
Thank you. I've loved talking to you. It's been really great. Thank you so much for your interest and your willingness, and for what you're doing. Give people an opportunity to talk about their passion, their purpose, and their second act.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And I know it's going to spark some interest in some other people who maybe caught in limiting beliefs about their skills, their current skills, and what they want to do. I think your story is an inspirational one of so much breadth of things that you've done and going certain directions. So it was great. And I know a lot of people can get things out of it, but
thanks much.
That is the end of our time with you, Martin. I'm sad to say. And Michael, this has been a phenomenal episode, a fantastic episode. And I applaud you for finding Martin and bringing him on the show. And what a great story. And I can't wait to do it again next week. So with that,
the universe somehow works in mysterious ways, brought us together, and this was a lot of fun. So we look forward to reconnecting with everyone again next week. Hope you all enjoy.
We'll see ya.
See ya.
The Second Act with Michael and John stars Michael Newborn and John Ballenger. The podcast is produced by Seltzer Kings. For more information on the show, check out michaelandjohn.com, or if you'd like to get involved in the conversation, give the guys a shout on their socials at The Second Act with Michael and John on most platforms. Thanks for listening.